Good morning. The floodgates have finally opened. With the latest Nintendo Direct, we've finally gotten a new look at and the title of the latest Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Analysts are working around the clock to find out what in the world is going on here. And honestly, it looked fun, so I've decided to throw my hat into the ring. What's good, everyone? I'm Faron Saffronia, and welcome to my early analysis of The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Let's get started. Let's start with what we're given. We've got a carving of a figure with enormous eyes and what is either a mask or strange protrusions poking out of their head. But we'll come back to this mysterious figure a little later. Following that, we're treated to what I'm hypothesizing is one of the first times Malice attacked the unknown people depicted in this mural. Malice is rapidly spreading toward the soldiers while either unarmed or disarmed victims already lay dead in the demonic pools. I've tried matching the shields to any pre-existing tribes, but there are currently no perfect matches. The closest I could find was the Sacred Shield from Skyward Sword. Moving on, we're once more greeted by the mysterious figure atop some kind of platform. It appears man-made. We're also shown 7 swirl-like symbols. Some might say this is evidence of the elusive Zonai people. Others might say they're the tears referenced in the game's title. I believe the answer lies somewhere down the middle. But we'll talk more about that after we've discussed the rest of the trailer. A girl with flowing hair is portrayed floating limp above more approaching Malice, who for now I'm fairly sure is Zelda. It may either be a reference to Zelda's fault in the first trailer, or when the imprisoned stole Zelda's essence in Skyward Sword. Regardless of which event it's referencing, the same woman is then shown cupping hands with the figure from the floating platform. To the right of this woman, we're also shown what's clearly a new language made for this game. I've taken some time to compare them to what we have for Skyloftian, Gerudo, and Sheikah, but I haven't come across any matches. But just while we're sitting there filled to the brim with questions, Link flings open a mysterious pair of stone doors and glorious new music begins to play. The doors got some interesting imagery on it, but we'll talk about that in a moment. I'd just like to take a moment to gush at how awesome and seamless that skydive was. 10 out of 10, Link. 10 out of 10. But as Link makes his glorious descent, the surface comes into view, and just as it does, we're taken to Link using his new reversal ability to ride a rock back into the sky. After that, they cut to Link climbing a route in the old and tattered garb we've seen in earlier trailers. And finally, Link lands on his new aircraft with a few bluish-green runic symbols visible on the surface, alongside a familiar green swirl. But now that we've covered all the basic details, let's dive a bit deeper. Starting off with our mysterious figure on the floating object. It's evident this is someone of great importance to this culture. They're a focal point of this mural surrounded by these 7 symbols. The number 7 is particularly significant because the last time the Legend of Zelda series dealt with the number 7, it specifically involved the 7 sages. In this specific case, I think it just refers to 7 being the number of important key items we need to gather this time, rather than the 4 divine beasts we liberated last game. When we last visited Hyrule, green had a strong association with spiritual energy, as referenced by luminous stones and the mysterious glowing phenomena on Satori Mountain. This new figure seems to be connected to this green spirit energy, standing surrounded by these 7 tears. I also don't think it's a stretch to say that this figure is probably the owner of the spectral hand from the first trailer, and the one responsible for giving Link his new arm. In any event, this same figure is shown to be forming a hand sign of some kind with the long-haired woman from before. This symbol is formed in the exact same way the 2 dragons meet up at the doorway Link opens not too long after this quick pan over. I'd actually like to take a moment to call attention to that. If we imagine the dragon's heads as the tips of the 2 hands' fingertips meeting, the doorway shows the 2 hands meeting just as they do in this mural. However, the title logo shows the 2 heads consuming each other's tails in a way that many are associating with the Ouroboros, a serpent consuming its own tail. Much like a certain other game Monolith Soft developed recently, but we're not here to talk about that today. I think that these people were at one point or another deeply connected with Hyrule. There is an unspoken bond here. While the title and even the imagery indicate a potential reference to the endless cycle of rebirth and destruction forced upon the world, I believe it's also symbolic of Hyrule, or more specifically Link and possibly Zelda's connection to this forgotten figure and or their people. they are in some way interlinked with one another. In some way, they are potentially counterparts that work in harmony to maintain some form of balance. I think that a lot of what this symbol means is entirely dependent on who the mysterious figure is. Is it Hylia outside of her mortal shell? Or is it some new being? There are other, darker interpretations you could theorize about based on my interpretation of the symbol, but that would honestly be its own video. Getting back on track, the mystery only deepens from here. Runes and other things glowing bluish-green? An emphasis on shadows? Imagery that shares similarities with the Sheikah and the hexing tribe that crafted the Majora's Mask? A people that live parallel yet interlinked with the Realm of Light? We've seen all of these traits before in a single tribe, the Twili. Is this group perhaps descendants of the Twili people? Well, I think it's tempting to say that something like that is exactly what's happening here. I haven't seen enough evidence for me to give a confident answer yet. Still, I think I've talked your ear off about the Zonai, the Twili, and whoever made these carvings long enough. Let's finally go outside. Our next detail is right there on Link's back, his new shield. We've seen a few shots of this shield already, but now we have certain proof that this shield's design and make are of the people who made these carvings. And once more, we've got the number 7 popping up on the shield just beneath the new eye symbol. I have my suspicions about this symbol, but I'll lay them out in full later. As Link makes a mad dash for the cliffside to hop off, we're treated to 3 more interesting things to make note of. The first, of course, is the new set of vial-like items he's carrying on his belt in place of the Sheikah Slate. Seeing as Link just left what may have been a temple or this game's shrine equivalent, I'm currently under the impression that we may need to reload these vials to make use of our new arm's abilities. Additionally, it's really easy to miss, but if you zoom in really close you'll notice what looks like a dragon hidden behind some of the floating islands. Or if not, a large serpent-like creature. We were told that Farosh, Dinral, and Nadra made their homes above the clouds. Perhaps we'll get to drop by their dens and say hello. And last but not least, I've saved a really interesting observation for last. Check out those gravestones on Link's right as he's running. Do they look familiar? If they don't, no worries. I caught that on my 4th watch. It's what appears to be Skyloft's graveyard. This is potentially huge. It could mean that part of this civilization was possibly built on what was left of Skyloft in the sky. There's possibly some other civilization out there that decided to inhabit parts of Skyloft. And from the looks of it, they expanded their territory quite a bit too. We can also see the enormous tower from the E3 trailer in the distance as well. Given the design of the structure, I'm confident in thinking that this is probably our Isle of Songs equivalent, where we'll probably be revisiting every so often to accomplish part of the main story. Fascinating structures aside, we've also learned that Link's time reversal ability can reverse time for objects both on the surface and those of Sky origin. This isn't a particularly lore-focused observation, but I think there are a lot of interesting gameplay applications we could see for this in a speedruns depending on how it works in-game. Meanwhile, when Link shows up in his older garb, he has a strange new axe. It's crude and feels much older than the woodcutter axe you could find on the surface. I'm still not convinced we're playing as modern Link and past Link, but this is definitely a point in favor of maybe. Regardless, it's the moments after that that have a lot more to tell us. As Link lands on his new hovercraft, we're treated to several points of interest. The castle is floating held up by Malice like in earlier trailers, but what's really strange here is Death Mountain. Malice is spewing from its crater. If that's not an implication of where a boss fight's located, I honestly don't know what is. Furthermore, as I mentioned before, we're able to make out 2 bluish-green runes on the ground depicting some kind of imagery. After replaying the trailer over and over again, I've come to the conclusion that they resemble a figure similar to the woman on the mural. I'm currently thinking they may be the site of either trials or places to land our new giant airplane. And finally, in that really tiny spot I'm zooming in on, we've got a green swirl similar to the one we saw underground with the malnourished Ganondorf. It's also the same swirl we see when Link in the ancient garb phases right through the bottom of a sky island and floats all the way up to the sky world. I have a feeling that these are the more consistent ways of getting back up into the sky if you wind up using your reversal ability too much. Maybe to send all of the sky debris back up really early game. Of course, that's provided there's no way to send it all crashing back down to Earth, like maybe a Blood Moon equivalent. Now you'd think that with the logo splash we'd be done here, but that's not quite where this ends. We've got one final detail, the Master Sword's new look. the green spectral blade coming out of the destroyed metal. It takes design cues from the Sheikah's swords, having a sci-fi-like glow to it contradictory to all the ancient stonework we've been seeing featured in the Sky Islands above. Yet it doesn't look out of place from what we've seen from this new civilization. Earlier in the video, I mentioned that the tear symbols could reference the Seven Sages, right? If we take that idea and look back on the Era of Winds, we may get a clearer idea of what these tears are for. For this theory to work, I'm hypothesizing that the vials on Link's belt are acting like a tear vessel from Skyward Sword or Twilight Princess. We know that the sword is still responsive to him in some way from a previous short clip. As such, it may be possible that, rather than restoring the Master Sword like in the Wind Waker, these tears are going to be used to either reforge it, or if nothing else, grant it that green energy blade. The original Master Sword needed 3 Sacred Flames and a Divine Blade, but at the moment we've got half a blade and potentially 7 tears. I like the idea of the tears also being used to fuel Link's new arm, but it also makes sense if the titular concept of this game was intended to reforge the Master Sword. It may seem weird to put so much focus on a picture of the Master Sword, but I ask you this: why is the title of Tears of the Kingdom a spoiler for Skyward Sword? My theory is that it had nothing to do with the name itself. It's the blade in the logo. The Master Sword may play a greater role in this game's story. In other words, the major callback to Skyward Sword isn't just possibly Demise or even Hylia. It's the relationship between Link and the Master Sword itself. What'll be interesting to see is how this affects the primary function of the Master Sword, sealing darkness. The Master Sword has been said time and time again to be the only truly effective weapon for sealing the darkness. Forged by Hylia herself, is giving the Master Sword a cool new energy blade, or reforging it with foreign materials able to preserve that function? And if so, how? The new figure in the mural may have our answers. I mentioned this before, but could this be Hylia? That would explain the interlinked bond symbolized by the hand sign the figure forms with the woman who may be Zelda. It would also add a new layer to this mural. Maybe the mural isn't just a prophecy or a tale of old. What we might be looking at is emergency instructions on how to forge a new darkness-sealing blade. The main logo's double dragon symbol could then also be interpreted as time being cyclical. Zelda will become Hylia, and then back to Zelda someday, allowing for a new cycle of events starting from a new Skyloft that may bring us right back to this point. I just have one issue with this. Didn't Hylia relinquish most of her powers in divine form to become Zelda? After all, if Hylia's Zelda, then whose hand was it that was keeping Ganondorf sealed? Whose power gave Link the new arm? On top of that, anytime we've seen Hylia's power manifest, it's always been gold, white, blue, or purple, not green. While it leaves the mystery of how this new being can potentially help reforge the Master Sword unsolved, I do believe this mysterious being is someone else. Perhaps the initial rift among the ancient people that resulted in this tribe is that this is a new god or goddess. One this ancient people chose to follow instead of Hylia. This new being may even have ties to Hylia. Siblings, perhaps? Plus, I normally associate Hylia with birds or bird-like beings. But while I was hunting for dragon parts in Breath of the Wild yesterday, I noticed that the figure's head looks a lot like a dragon's head. Those wide protrusions on the side of its head match up really well with the long floppy ears the dragons have on their heads. Whoever this is, they're likely just as deeply associated with these creatures as the culture behind all of its imagery. Having 2 deities also furthers the symbolic nature of the twin dragons. Maybe much like how the Sheikah and the Twilly are generally considered the good shadow elemental people, maybe this is the good shadow counterpart to Hylia's light, with its own dominion over time. Perhaps that hand sign is how the culture forms pacts. The 7 sages under this goddess and their priest or priestess would seal the ancient evil underground, disappearing from history along with their fantastical civilization in the sky. The people of Hylia would then safeguard the light of the surface and the sky above. Perhaps the hand sign and the twin dragons are symbolic of that promise and their bond. It also explained how they'd reforged the blade. If Link is basically receiving assistance from that side's Hylia and Zelda equivalent, then the new Blade of Evil's Bane should be equal, if not superior to the old one after combining the 2 forces. Honestly, I'd be inclined to say that this is the mysterious Zonai tribe too. But there's one thing about the art and the creations of this tribe that bother me. The new symbol. We see it front and center on Link's back. It's even got the 7 triangles mirroring the 7 tiers surrounding the mysterious figure. But that's not the main issue. It's the fact that it's an eye. Now, it's not like the Sheikah have exclusive rights to eye symbols in Hyrule. The Twilly's fused shadow has very distinctive patterns around the mask's eyes, and one of the most striking features of the Majora's Mask is its eyes. But in most cases, things with eyes tend to eventually find their way back to the Sheikah. This eye appears as if it's crying several tears rather than shedding a single tear. This might relate to the title drop, but the highlight here is that it shares a similar design concept to the Sheikah and Yiga symbols. Even if this tribe happens to call themselves the Zonai, I think it's possible that this tribe is just another split from the main Sheikah tribe, just like the Yiga clan. The Sheikah focused on fusing magic and technology with an emphasis on the color blue, likely in association with the royal family. In fact, I'd like to take this moment to point out that we're given runes through teardrops at those little rune stations at the Sheikah pedestals. While the basic functions may be different, the ancient Sheikah were already using a fancier yet similar kind of technology to what we might see with the tears and green energy from this new tribe. Especially if these tears wind up forging a new blade of sorts. Looking at the ancient short sword, we already had a blade that outdamaged the master sword. At least without fully finishing the trial of the sword or not being around malice. There is already a precedent for potentially magic teardrops making pretty impressive weapons. On the other hand, the Yiga clan focused on dark magic and a more simple approach. They utilized bladed weapons no different from most of the weapons available around Hyrule, with the exception of one, the Wind Cutter. That blade glows an eerie light and can fire off wind blades. They have talismans and rune-like abilities exclusive to them, but no energy swords or robots. They favor brute force and the color red, matching Ganon. Last but not least, we have this new group. Regardless of who they are, we know a few key things about them. They don't completely lack technology. Case in point, our cool new glider. The new golems also seem to be operating using a similar green energy. Their design concept is extremely similar to the Agni and Levnesses from Xenoblade 3, with electric-looking streams of energy connecting the pieces of the golem-like automatons together. I'd also be willing to bet that rather than focusing on whatever energy source the ancient Sheikah weapons use, this green energy requires a different one. They also go for an emphasis on stonework and magic rather than metal and machinery. The dragon symbols have been everywhere, matching up with what we know to be the Zonai ruins below, perhaps implying the worship of animals. Providing that this aesthetic matches in the coincidence, we also know that their hexing magic grants the user devastating power. Furthermore, if we observe their art, there are several design cues on the mural that are incredibly similar to the way Sheikah make things, namely the eyes. In fact, the mysterious figure has a closed third eye on the center of its forehead, similar to the eye that the Sheikah draw on their foreheads. This would also solve the missing link between how the ancient civilization was somehow involved with multiple Sheikah shrines. They're not vastly different tribes at all. They're basically cousins. It would also mean that the Sheikah wound up mirroring the Golden Three, a blue tribe with the knowledge to make fantastical inventions, a red tribe focusing on their pursuit and worship of power, and a green tribe who seems to place great emphasis on merit and valor. But honestly, I could go on forever. I've got tons of ideas swimming around in my head right now, and I think I need to give them a moment to build up. Thank you all so much for watching. I've got plans for even more Zelda content as we move forward with Tears of the Kingdom. I'd like to try my hand at theory crafting more as well, going around the current Hyrule that we know right now to see if we can spot any interesting details that may give us clues for what's coming up in May. You can also look forward to lore videos and helpful tips for newer players. If you need a little variety to keep things lively while we wait for another, hopefully timely, update on Tears of the Kingdom, I also cover Pokemon, Xenoblade, and any other game on the Switch that catches my attention. If that sounds interesting, please feel free to check out my other content as well. If you enjoyed yourself, please leave a like and subscribe for more Zelda content. And before we part ways, I'd like to know, what are your thoughts on the carvings? Who do you think made them and why? I'm Faron Saffronia, and this has been my early analysis and thoughts on The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. See you next time!